Hello everyone, this week we're doing a video series all about formatting your novel from scratch. These videos are going to share everything that I've learned about formatting, and I hope that they will be a very helpful resource because I'm going to share everything that I wish I would have known about formatting back when I first started formatting my novels from scratch. A couple of the videos in this series will apply to authors whether you are pursuing traditional publishing or self-publishing, while other videos are going to be specifically designed for self-publishing authors who are considering formatting because they want to save themselves money. All right, formatting refers to your novel's layout and appearance, which means that it actually refers to a very wide variety of things such as the chapter headers, the images that you include, organizing the entire book, the front and back matter, down to the tiniest little details like the font size or the font style or even the spacing. Usually formatting is something that you want to be done so well that the reader doesn't even notice it, but in some rare instances, such as the chapter headers, you want the formatting to actually draw attention to itself because it is so beautiful. Since formatting is honestly a lot of work and a bit of a headache, my goal for this video series is to help you decide first if formatting on your own is a good fit for you, and second, to help you know exactly what you're getting into before you start, and finally to make the formatting process a lot smoother for you than it was for me when I started out if you do decide to give formatting your novel a shot. Let me pause the video for 1 second. I should rewind really quick and introduce myself. My name is Bethany Atazadeh. I am your professor in this free mini masterclass. Free for you at least. YouTube is paying me, so thank you in advance for watching the videos all the way through, for liking, subscribing, sharing with your friends. All of these things are like a free tip jar, so it really helps my channel. Thank you so much in advance. And it's looking like it's gonna be a very full class. So let me introduce you to our TA real quick. This is my teaching assistant, Google. She is super helpful. She's available at all hours of the day and night, and she has pretty much endless resources. So I'm gonna be honest with you, even though I am the professor of this course, she knows more than I do. I am only able to share what I know and what I have chosen to do, so just like everything else in publishing and writing, there's probably 1,000,001 different ways to do formatting. This is just my personal experience. I'm basing everything off of my own experience formatting over 10 different novels and sometimes learning things through what they call trial by fire. So again, I don't know everything about formatting, but I am going to share as much as possible in the series, and for everything else, I'm going to point you to my fabulous TA Google for any support questions you might have. Number 3, I use this gorgeous template that has built-in formatting already set up, and I highly recommend it. I'll talk more about this template at the end of today's video, so make sure you stick around to the end to find out more about that. Okay, back to the video. We are going to cover, number 1, the 10 basic formatting rules that apply to all novels across the board, plus a few fun extra bonus formatting rules that are a little bit more bendy. These will allow you to set up your novel with basic formatting foundations. There are no specific programs required, and like I said, these are extremely standardized rules, but I will let you know which of these rules are more breakable than others so that you can know going into it if something is going to shout, "I'm an amateur writer." It's better to be aware of the rules and make sure you're looking classy and professional than to accidentally break a rule you didn't even know existed and come across a little bit amateur. The second video in this series is going to cover what's called front and back matter, which is honestly just everything in the front and back of the book that is not the story itself. For example, your title page, copyrights page, acknowledgements, author page, newsletter sign up, other books by the author, etc. This topic applies to all books as well and to all authors, although I will say that it is more important for self-published authors to know since you are in charge of every bit of this, while traditionally published authors don't have to worry quite as much because their publishing house will make most of the decisions in this specific area. We'll cover all the standard pages as well as some bonus pages you can consider and how to set each of these up. So it's going to be a big video, but there is no special software that you need for this one either. The third video in this series will focus on a surprisingly huge topic of how to choose the size for your book and also knowing how to resize it if you ever need to so that it won't be rejected by a publishing on-demand company. Just a quick note, this video applies specifically to physical copies of the book like paperbacks and hardcovers. Fortunately, you do not have to worry about sizing an ebook, thank goodness. You wouldn't think this needs a whole video, but trust me, it is a big topic. And the majority of this particular video is going to lean heavily on Microsoft Word, but you can still learn a lot about the thought process behind book sizes, even if you don't have Word. The fourth video is all about fonts. So choosing the main font for your book, some of the things that you really need to consider that are very important, as well as the size of your font, chapter header fonts, how to set up something called a style pane in Word so that you can change the entire novel or specific parts of the novel like your chapter headers with a single click instead of going through painstakingly one row at a time. And again, this one is going to apply more to paperbacks, although you may still pick up some things that apply to ebooks in this video as well. In the fifth video, we're going to talk about adding images with something called the bleed feature. And no, I did not make that up. That is actually what it's called. The idea is where an image can bleed off the page and therefore there won't be any awkward white spaces, but it's very tricky to do and it holds up a lot of authors. So I'm going to walk you through the steps for both inserting pictures, really basic, and then a little bit more complicated, and how to add that bleed feature so that your book, again, does not get rejected by a print-on-demand company. This is useful for adding book maps or putting in really beautiful chapter header images or maybe character art or even your author picture. So it's going to be a really fun topic. And then the next video is very closely connected. Video 6 is dedicated to those chapter headers that I told you about, where we actually can create really gorgeous, unique chapter headers where you go a little bit above and beyond and you add some imagery or you just do a little bit fancier fonts. I'm going to do an entire video on how to make gorgeous chapter headers that are more unique and might include imagery and how to insert those into your novel correctly. And I also have a video on how to make a map, and I figured that's close enough to formatting that I'm going to include it in the formatting series linked below, as well as a few others that I think might be related, such as how I use Canva or anything that I do in the future if you guys have more requests for formatting that I don't cover in this series. So feel free to leave comments for me below. I would love to hear what you want to know about formatting. One last note when you are making your decision, because as you can see, formatting is a lot of work and it might make you question if it's really worth it and why do authors bother to do this when there are other options out there. The main reason people typically choose to format on their own is to save money, because yes, there are other easier options out there, which I'll talk about in a second, but while they're easier, they're also a lot more expensive. Unfortunately, saving money does not mean that you're necessarily going to save time or energy or headaches. So there is a bit of a learning curve to formatting, and if you would rather just spend a little bit more money and save yourself some of that stress, here are two other options you can consider. One option is you can purchase a specific formatting software, like for example Vellum. This is very expensive, but it is a one-time purchase and you can use it for all future books as long as you have a MacBook in this case, or from what I understand, you can rent space on the cloud, or I don't know because I've never actually used Vellum, but I would encourage you to look into this and see if it's a good fit, because I've heard many good things from authors about Vellum. And that's going to give you like a standard package of formatting options where you can do a lot but only so much. And then the other option is even more unique formatting by hiring a professional formatter who does absolutely everything. You just kind of throw your book at them, wish them luck, and they send it back to you as this beautifully new baby book. I'm just kidding, I don't know. I've never worked with a formatter, I have no idea. But you do get what you pay for. It's gonna be higher quality if you pay for a professional to do the formatting. However, this is a purchase that you will have to make every single time you publish a book. So it can really add up price-wise. Just keep in mind that you're not actually locked in. And maybe you try formatting and you're like, no, I can't do this. I'm gonna hire somebody. Or maybe you hire someone the first time and then further on down the road when you're more comfortable, you decide to buy Vellum or learn how to format yourself. So you are not locked in, but I personally really like to save money, which is why I started formatting my novels from scratch when I started out. And while this part of the publishing process is definitely a huge pain to learn initially, I think it can be extremely worth it. This video is all about the 10 basic formatting rules, and there are of course way more than 10 formatting rules, but these top 10 are super important for all authors to know. They are especially important for self-published authors to know because if you break them, it is going to catch a reader's eye and it's going to scream, "I'm an amateur author," and you want your book to be classy and professional and blend in with all the other books on your shelf. So these 10 formatting rules are going to help you to do that and look very snazzy. Stick around to the end for some extra fun bonus formatting rules that are much less standard, so you can decide if you would like to follow them or break them. Always do single spacing. Never double spacing. This applies to both between sentences and also between lines. If you take a look at the books on your shelf, you're going to find that this is a standard across the board, no exceptions ever. Every single book is going to have one space between every single sentence, and they're going to have single spacing lines. Double spacing is used more in the editing land, but when you get to your final product, you always have single spacing in your books. This one in particular is going to be the most awkward if you break this rule because it's really gonna stand out and not in a good way. If you've been doing either of these wrong, don't worry, there's a very easy fix for it. First, let's start with the 2 spaces between every sentence. If you did that wrong, you can use the find and replace tool to actually go and search every single instance of a double spacing in your manuscript, and you could do a replace all with a single space and just click replace all. Done. That's how easy that is to fix. If you've been writing with double spacing instead of single spacing, this is also a very easy fix. You're going to start by clicking Control All to capture all of your manuscript, everything in there, and then you're going to go into Format, and under Paragraph where it says double, you're going to click that drop down and change it to the single line spacing option. If you decide to use that pre-formatted template, then this will already be set up correctly for you. Leave it exactly like it is. The second important formatting rule is justified text. So while Word and Google Docs and Scrivener, etc. usually automatically do something called left side justification, where everything is even on the left side but it's ragged on the right side, in books, the book is justified to both sides. So the difference is that it's going to be exactly even along both the left and the right side. And readers are used to seeing this. It looks really professional to the eye, looks a lot better than left side justification by itself. So to update this is also very easy. You're going to look for the justification option, which you can use the search bar if you need to find it. And then very often they're going to have these cute little images that show you exactly what it looks like, where the lines are all to the left, all to the right, or evenly spaced across the page, which is your perfect justification. Now you can obviously Google to find out more about what justification does and is, but essentially it's going to spread out that sentence, but it never actually puts space in between the letters within a sentence. It only puts space between separate words. So it looks very clean and classy. The third standard formatting rule is to include an indent for the first line of every paragraph. And no, you do not just tab over. You want to actually set up this formatting so that it applies to the entire novel automatically. To set the indentation, you're going to go to the exact same place we just went for justification, and you're going to go to Format and then to Paragraph, and you'll see that indentation that we just played with. And under that indentation section, you're going to go over to the special option and you're going to click that first line, and I like to do 0.3, although some places also recommend doing 0.5. So whatever you choose to do, you're going to apply it to the first line of the entire novel so that every single paragraph's first line will be indented that specific amount. If you're using the template, you're going to go ahead up to the style pane, you're going to right click and do modify the style. And of course it's already set up this way, just so you know, but if you wanted to change the indentation, you would go to that first line spot, the same place as I just showed you, and you can play around with it there to whatever you would like it to be for the entire novel. Rule number 4, of course, is that there is an exception to this rule. So even though I just said that every single line in your novel is going to have that first line indented, the exception is when it's the very first line of a chapter or the very first line after a scene break, which in that case, it should be justified all the way to the left side. I know, they're just trying to confuse us, but that is the standard in the industry. If you look at the books on your shelf, you're going to find that the very first line of a chapter or the very first line after a scene break is always going to remove that indentation that we talked about. This one is so subtle that readers honestly rarely even notice it, but it is a standard in the publishing industry. Rule number 5 is that chapter headers always start on a new page. Again, if you take a look at the books on your shelf, you are never going to find a chapter that starts halfway down the page after another chapter has ended. You always start a brand new page. But rule number 6 is related to that, which is that you have to put in a page break for a new chapter, which means that you can't just go enter until you get to the next page, because unfortunately, when you submit that to a different publishing company or into an ebook format or whatever the case may be, it's not always going to stay the way it looks on your screen. So the formatting can get super wonky and it can go back to that 2 chapters on 1 page issue that we just mentioned, which is a no-no. So to fix this, you insert a page break. It's very easy to do, and you can search page breaks if you have trouble finding it, but for me, it's under the layout tab at the top, and then you click breaks, and it's this next page option where it says if you insert a section break, it will start a new section on the next page. So clicking that is going to assure that no matter what format your book is in, if you turn it into an ebook or if you turn it into a PDF or whatever the case may be, that is always going to be a stop and a new page, which is really important. Rule number 7 is also related to chapters, and that is that the chapter header should begin 1/3 to 2/3 down the page. How far down the page is honestly up to you. It's usually 1/3 to 2/3. Sometimes I've heard halfway down the page. Honestly, it's up to you. Take a look at the books on your shelf that are in your genre to see what's really standard in your specific genre. But the idea is to make the chapter header pop and make it clear that you're starting something new. This rule, I feel like, is a little less standardized. When I looked at the books on my shelf to do research, I found that it kind of varied, but there was always at least a little bit of extra white space at the top, if not a lot, and also usually some artwork and other fun stuff. We'll talk about that when we get to that video on chapter headers specifically. But the important part is that you're going to want to make sure that your actual story for the beginning of each chapter starts partway down the page. If you want to save pages, you can bump it up to maybe the halfway mark or even up a little bit higher to the top, as long as you leave a little bit of space to differentiate that it's a chapter. And if you're not sure exactly what you want to do, I definitely recommend taking a look at the books on your shelf, specifically the ones in your genre, to see what's most common in your specific genre. Number 8 is page numbers. So a book always has page numbers, and this is obvious. I'm sure you're aware of it, but it can still be very easy for an author to forget. Now, the nice thing is that if you're using that formatted template that I showed you, the page numbers are already included, and they're included correctly. But if for some reason you've decided to format from scratch, there are a few rules about page numbers that you need to know. The first page number rule is not totally standard. I've seen this rule broken, but typically they're placed in what's called the footer, and that's at the very bottom of a page. But sometimes they are placed at the top as well. So that's why I say that that particular placement is less standard than actually having the page numbers themselves. Adding page numbers is very easy. In Word, you're going to go to the very top, you're going to click Insert, and then you're going to scroll down to the page numbers option, and you can choose to format however you want. If you want them at the top or at the bottom, if you want them to be formatted where they are always on the outside of the page, which is, by the way, standard for novels. You don't want it to all be on the left side or all on the right side. You want it to be on the left and the right far sides of the book, if that makes sense. That's standard for the industry. And the second rule is that page numbers are not supposed to show up on the first page of every chapter. So you'll notice that on the first chapter page and also on other important pages like the title page and copyrights page, usually those pages you are not going to see page numbers at all. Even if they are counted, they are erased for that specific chapter header page. Now the good news is that if you're using that template that I showed you, all of this is already set up for you. Thank goodness, because it's a lot of complicated rules and it's very confusing to set up. So you might have to do your research if you're putting this in from scratch on how exactly to do all these page number rules and make sure that they don't show up on chapter pages and that they don't start on page 1 of the book, but they start on chapter 1 of the book. But fortunately, if you're using that template, all of these things are already set up. Rule number 9 is very related to the page numbers. If you've got your page numbers on the bottom, then you're going to have your author name and your book title at the top in the header. So you've got your footer with the page number, and then your header has the other information that's standard about the book. So this is the rule that I've seen broken most often, so I can't say you absolutely have to do this, but I do have to say that it looks very classy and I see it very, very commonly in books. So what you're going to do is this is going to switch back between odd and even numbers. You're going to put your author name, your full author name or your pen name on one side header, and on the other side of the header you're going to put the title of the book. Just the title, no subtitle, none of that. It doesn't really matter if it's left side author name, right side book title, or if it's left side book title, right side author name. The point is just to have them rotating so that every time a reader opens the book, you can see both on the page. And I think, honestly, I'm just guessing here, but I think that the reason this is done is so that if somebody takes a picture of, you know, an open page, you can still see either the author or the name of the book, so you can always have a reference if you're looking at a page and maybe you take a picture and post it on Instagram, your readers have a reference for what the heck the book is that you're showing. Again, just like with page numbers, there are very similar rules. So just like with page numbers, your author name / book title, whichever one is rotating, is never going to show up on that first page of the chapter because your gorgeous chapter header is going to be the focus there. You do not want to have any header at the top of a chapter page, and you also don't want to have your header show up, whether it's your author name or your book title, on things like the main title page, the copyrights page, all of the like big first pages, so to speak, that stand on their own. This is another complicated thing to set up, so thank goodness the pre-formatted template already has it set up this way. I love it. I really, really appreciate not having to do all those extra steps and figure that out. So that's, again, why I recommend the template. Rule number 10, consistency. Whatever you decide to do, you need to stick with it so that all your formatting looks consistent and professional. If you have wonky formatting where one chapter looks like this, the other one looks like that, and you play around with it, it's going to look very amateur. This consistency rule is true not just for the rules that I just shared with you, but also for other fun formatting styles that I'm going to share in a second. So whatever you go with, it's really important to keep it consistent. For example, if you choose to include a really pretty image for chapter 1 in the header, then every single chapter header needs to have an image. If not the exact same image, then at least the exact same size and placement. All right, speaking of extra fancy formatting, I do have a couple fun bonus tips to share with you that I mentioned. So these are not required. These are more for fun and to make it a little bit prettier. And a lot of them are specifically for the first page of a chapter or for scene breaks. Although of course, there are other books that play with formatting throughout the book. So you can definitely check out those books on your shelf if you want to like look into this even more. Number 1, the most obvious extra formatting that you will see in novels is that decorative, gorgeous header. And so whether it's just a little extra oomph or it's the entire top portion of the page, or even on rare occasions, the full 2-page spread, we're going to dedicate an entire video in the series to chapter headers and talk more about this because this can be really fun to play with. The second extra bonus formatting thing you can do is something called drop caps, and you will see that in that formatting template in a couple different first lines of the chapter. So it's the very, very first letter is made larger and separate, and so this gets a little bit wonky when you're uploading to different vendors, and it doesn't always translate well to ebooks, or at all, I think. So I personally kind of gave up on them after my first book. I just felt like that was too much for me. But if you want to try it, you can definitely look into drop caps and or research how exactly they work. The third fun formatting bonus rule is to do, I'm just going to call it first line of the chapter fanciness. And by that, I mean that you just make that first line pop. So you can do this in a bunch of different ways. Some people just do all caps all the way across, or all caps for the first 3 words, or the first 4 words, or the first 5 words. And sometimes you can add italics, or you can even do a slightly different font if you really wanted to, although that might be going a little bit too far. But essentially, you're making that first line just really pop. Whatever you decide to go with, remember rule number 10 back in the absolute standard unbreakable rules, which is consistency. Number 4 is doing that exact same fancy first line, but with a scene break. So after you've gone from one scene to the next and you have a little break, which we'll talk about in a second, then you would again have a fancy first line. So it's totally optional, but it's really fun. It looks pretty. And so that leads to number 5, which is fancier scene breaks. So you might see in some books that authors just literally add an extra space before they break into a new scene. While other authors, I'd say the most common one that you'll see is the 3 little asterisks. I can say that right? And so that's probably the most common if you want to keep it simple, but other authors will maybe insert fun little images or do something a little bit fancier. So it's totally up to you, but that leads to number 6, I think, yes, which is that draft to digital offers even more gorgeous options for formatting specifically for ebooks. You don't actually have to publish on draft to digital at all to use these formatting options. You can set up your book and you can put in all the gorgeous formatting with the chapter headers and the scene breaks without ever publishing on draft to digital. You can download that baby and publish it somewhere else, or keep it for yourself, or use it for ARC copies, or you name it. Now, let's go on to the next video in the series, which is the front and back matter. Front and back matter, which is literally everything in the front and back of your book that is not the story itself. So that's going to include things like the title page, the copyrights page, the dedication if you want one, the acknowledgements page, the about the author page, signing up for a newsletter, or other bonus pages like book maps and glossaries and next releases coming out and all those other fun things. I'm going to go over a huge list of front and back matter and why authors specifically choose to use different things and how to set them up if you would like to use them. And I'm going to show you using my book, The Stolen Kingdom. Before I show you my screen though, I just want to say that the best thing you can do when you are deciding on what goes in your front and back matter is research the books on your bookshelf, especially the ones in your specific genre, because my genre is young adult science fiction and fantasy, and what I do when I approach these is based on what I have researched, and your genre might do things a little bit differently, or it might organize the front and back matter differently. They might even have some cool pages that I don't mention here today, so it's always really good to do your own research. I feel like that's true of every single video in this series, but especially this one. Front and back matter does apply to all books, but it's especially important for self-published authors to know because all the decisions here are fully on your shoulders and you get to decide what goes in your book. Just so you know, before we dive into it, there's no specific program required. You don't have to do this in Word, and you can even use a fun tool like draft to digital to add front and back matter later on. We'll go into that all in a second. First one though is the most obvious, and it's really beautiful, and that is the title page. So whenever I share my Word document over on Instagram, I always get people asking me, how did you do that beautiful font? Like, what is it? I want to have it. So that is my first tip, which is that your title page font should match the font for the book cover. This particular formatting rule is followed, I would say, like 90% of the time. There's some rare instances where a publisher might do something that's also very unique and beautiful, but slightly different. The times when this does not look good is when you see a self-published author just use a basic generic font here, which I have done in the past when I didn't know better, and that just says, hey, this book is self-published. One of the best things you can do to look more classy and professional and more like a traditionally published book is just to ask your cover designer and say, hey, can I get a PNG file of that title text so that I can put it on my title page? And I have never met a cover designer who wasn't totally fine with this. Most of them actually include it in their package. If for any reason you have to pay more, I think it's worth it. And then you're going to insert that PNG PNG file as an image. As you can see right here, if I click on that, that's actually an image that I inserted. So we will talk more about inserting images in the video on how to insert images, because as you can see, it's very important to know for you to include a really nice PNG file of your title. But the next thing you're going to notice is that in my book, at least, I have 2 title pages. So I have this first one, which is just the title font, absolutely nothing else. And this is the signing page where you leave lots of blank room to sign your author name. And it's pretty common in the traditional publishing world, although you don't have to have 2. But the next one is over here, and that is so that it's also going to appear on the right side of the book, because page 1 is always going to be on the right side. So this will also be on the right. I'm going to zoom in and show you. So I have obviously the book title, but it also says book 1 in the series. So it's like the full information about the title. And then also my author name is included, also a PNG file, as you can see when I hover over it. And then below that, I have my company name, Grace House Press, as well as my company logo right there, and the copyright information for this. I'm gonna zoom back out again so you can see them side by side. And I would recommend that if you don't wanna do 2 title pages, that you would go with this second option here that includes the relevant information for you as the author, for the publishing company, and the copyright information. That's just my recommendation though. The next page we're going to talk about is copyright. So I'm going to zoom in again to show you my copyright page. Copyrights pages are fairly standard, but even these are going to change and vary a little bit from book to book. So it can give you some ideas on what you might specifically want to do. The first line is the book title, and then the second line is the all-important copyright, which of course is what makes this the copyrights page. So the order of this is always the symbol first, and then the year of the copyright, and then your author name or your pen name. This next section is, I'm going to call it the protective jargon. Totally official name for that. I have no idea what to call this, but this first part is making it clear, nobody ripped this book off. I have it copyrighted. Don't you dare steal my work, which is a good thing to include. The second part says this book is a work of fiction. This is the legal jargon that is protecting you if someone crazy comes out of the woodwork, which is very rare, but you never know what might happen, so it's good to protect yourself. The next thing that you'll usually find on a copyrights page is some type of contact information. Now, in the traditional publishing world, this is going to be an actual address, which is why if you have the template, you'll see the option to include an address. And that's of course because they do actually have physical buildings for their company. Now, if you have a PO box, you could definitely include it here, but you also don't need to. As long as you have some type of contact information, the general idea is for someone to be able to contact you. The next section is your credits section. And so this one, you're going to notice mine is really huge. This is my personal choice as a self-published author who gets to choose whatever I put here. But in traditional publishing, usually you won't put quite so much. And so this is totally up to you what you want to include. But cover design is the one thing that's almost always included. The next section is the ISBN information, and the editions is at the very bottom. So let me go over and break this down real quick. ISBNs are pretty standard information, honestly, just so that if someone wanted to, they could take that number, plug it into Amazon, and find that specific version of your book. ISBNs are honestly mostly used by retailers and maybe libraries, not so much by your average reader. And then if you don't purchase them and you want to use the free ones on KDP or one of the other platforms, then what you would do is first get the ISBN number information from them. As you're going through the uploading process, you will come to a screen where they allow you to decide if you want a free ISBN, and then when you get that ISBN information, you will include it in your book before you finish the uploading process. Now at the bottom is the edition. Both of these are edition related. I once did my research on this countdown, which usually starts with the number 10, and from what I gather, I think I did this wrong actually. I think it is supposed to be like this. So if I remove the number 1, that lets people know this is no longer the first edition. Now we are on the second edition. So you don't have to include this. I just think it looks snazzy and professional to stick to the traditional publishing standards. But this is the older way, back when there was actual big mass printings of books, which there still are from what I gather. But in self-publishing, it's print on demand. So I like to do this more modern version right above that, where I actually explain for people who don't know, this is a second edition, and here is when that
second edition was first published. All right, I promise that they won't all be this complicated. The next page is a dedication page, which I actually don't have, so I pulled this fun image from Pinterest, but usually a dedication is just 1 to 2 lines at the most, and it's a dedication to a specific reader. All right, I'm gonna zoom out again because I wanted to show you this is all the front matter, these first pages, and then my chapter 1 starts here. So the rest of this is much more optional, but I wanna walk you through it really quick before we go to the back matter. So first is my also by page. And the reason authors include this is simply so that your readers can know, hey, this author has other books, maybe I should check them out. Now that the Enchanted Crown is about to come out, I could actually go and add that in here. And then the way that you see that they're highlighted to be links is you right click and you click hyperlink, and then you will add the link right here, which is my universal book link for books to read. This takes you to all the different vendor sites in one, and there you go. Now the Enchanted Crown is added. And sorry that that one's highlighted. I accidentally clicked on it and now it's going to stay highlighted until I close the document. That is a book that I want my readers to be able to find very easily. Now, obviously for a paperback, these links are not going to be clickable. So you could go ahead and highlight it, and you could just simply right click the hyperlink option and remove it. The next page is what's called a call to action. For me, that is a request that they sign up for my author newsletter. It's very simple. I kept it very basic. It just says sign up for my author newsletter. Be the first to learn about Bethany Atazadeh's new releases and receive exclusive content for both readers and writers. And then of course, I want them to have an actual place to go. So this is another hyperlink where they can click on it in the ebook format and go straight to my website where they can sign up for my newsletter, but also it is the actual address for a paperback reader to be able to type in. All right, so I'm zooming out here at the bottom right because I wanted you to be able to see all these pages put together. So the map is actually on 2 pages. To do that, I simply made 2 copies of it and I cropped it down the middle, and I cropped it down the middle the other half, and I saved them that way and inserted them as an image. So see, if I click on it, that is an image that I've drawn all the way out to the edge of the page, and we'll talk more about that again in our video all about inserting images. But now on this left side, I'm gonna scroll all the way to the bottom and show you my back matter, which is all the way up to here. So I have a lot of back matter, but let's start with the basics. First and foremost, you're going to recognize my call to action page. You do not have to put a call to action in both the front and back, but I think it's really valuable to do because some readers will be curious and sign up right away. But more often, I think you finish a book and then you want to know more. And then that's when you're like, sure, I would like to know if there's more books in the future. If you are only going to pick one place to put a call to action, like signing up for a newsletter, I would suggest the back is probably the best place. The second very standard in the industry back matter you're going to have is the acknowledgments, and mine is 3 pages long, which I tried to shrink it down as much as possible, but I was very wordy. I would recommend more between 1 to 2 pages if possible, but I had a lot of amazing people that I wanted to thank. I think it says right here, 27 people, and I was joking, 1 pup. That's a little shout out to Penny. Your acknowledgments page is going to be whatever you want it to be, but essentially it is a place to give credit to all the people who have helped you, to make sure that you give them some love and thank them for being there and being a part of your journey. So that's a really great place to make some wonderful people feel really good. And then the last one that's really, really standard in back matter, although I have seen books that don't include this, is your author page. What you're going to see most often is a little bit of an author bio. And so this is my old bio. I need to update it. And now that we're in the age of social media, you're going to see very often a place to connect with the author that includes some of their social media information. And then I would say probably 80 to 90% of the time you'll also see an author photo, but this could be genre specific to young adult fiction since that's what I typically read. So definitely do your genre research and check out what an author page usually looks like. But essentially the idea is to let your reader know more about you and let your reader know where they can find you. So if you are writing under a pen name, you can still share something that will let readers know about you, even if it's not something that will make you easily identifiable, and you can still share where they can find you with pen names on social media and that fun stuff. Now let's dig into some back matter that's more optional. So I'm going to start with the glossary, which is so much fun. This is probably very specific to fantasy and science fiction, where you are creating worlds and places and your reader needs a place to keep track. This could be located at the front or at the back. I decided to locate it at the back of the book. I feel like that's the more common place for it, and if I zoom in on it, you're going to see all of the different characters and places in the world that I put the name, and then I put how to pronounce the name, and then I put a tiny little description so that a reader can go into the back and look at it. But I try to keep it something that won't give away any spoilers, just in case the reader decides to flip to the back and read it earlier on in the story. All right, now we're gonna scroll up and I'm gonna show you the next optional thing, which starts here and then is this little excerpt here for the Ginny Key. So since this is book 1 in the series, I wanted to include the first chapter of book 2 with a little link at the bottom to buy. And then of course I also wanted to include an image, because I think if you have the book cover, it makes sense to include that. And then I have 2 other links to buy as well. Now I leave these hyperlinked even for the paperback because they still say what I want them to say. If you are doing ebooks, then it's really smart to hyperlink it so that they can literally click on it and go straight to the book online. Having an excerpt is not required whatsoever. I just think it's a really fun way to grab your reader's attention and make them want to read the next book. So it doesn't have to be the next book in your series. It could also be the next book in a new series or another standalone, or even a bit of a short story that makes them want to go over to your author newsletter to read more. Or if you don't feel like you're quite done with a story and you don't want to include the actual story itself, you could include just the cover and a little link to buy that says this is coming soon with a release date if you would like to do that instead. The next thing you're going to notice, I'm going to zoom out here so you can see all of it, is my gorgeous character art that I mentioned earlier. These first 3 are by Ingrid Nordley, and then this one is by Margarita Lapina, and they gave me permission to include it in my book. I'm going to show you what that looks like on the page, but it looks so beautiful. I really was excited to include these as exclusives in the hardcover, but just so you know, I did not include character art in any of my other books, so it's not required. It's just a fun little bonus if you're able to include it. Another fun bonus that is just for my hardcover, but I thought this would be fun to show you, is a frequently asked questions section. So I have 4 questions that I cover here that I got from you guys over on Instagram. And then last but not least, actually 2 other things I include here. I'm gonna zoom way out so you can't see the ending of the book here, but this is Gideon's story right here. And so he got his own exclusive chapter from his point of view. That is the scene that happens right before the Ginny Key starts, and it's a year before we meet him in this book in the Stolen Kingdom. So it's a fun little bonus. I'm gonna zoom way in on this page to show you guys. I have a turn the page for more. This is actually an image I made in Canva. So again, I just want to shout out that we're gonna have a video on how to include images and make fun stuff like this in another video in this series, and it shares all of the things that are included in the back matter that might grab a reader's attention and want to make them keep turning the page so that they don't miss anything. All right, that was a look at the front and back matter in the Stolen Kingdom.
That's the most common front and back matter, as well as a few fun bonus options you can include if you want to. I hope you enjoyed this video. Give it a thumbs up if you did. Now let's go on to the next video in the series, which is choosing the size for your book and also understanding how to resize it if necessary. Oh hey, these 2 things are crucial for self-published authors to know. We're going to cover number 1, choosing the correct size for your book. Number 2, how the size of your book directly relates to your genre. Number 3, how the size of your book actually also affects the cost both for you and for your readers. Number 4, where you can find templates with the exact size that you were looking for. And number 5, if you're using the DIYbookformats.com template that I've been talking about throughout this series, it comes in a specific size, so I'm going to show you how to resize it to be the size that you want and that fits your genre and your needs. Last but not least, I will end with 3 extremely valuable secrets that are going to save you a lot of money by helping you make your book less pages. We're going to talk about all of that, but really quick, I just wanted to let you know that this step does apply to physical books, not to ebooks, because ebooks you don't have to worry about the size. that's a whole other animal. So I just wanted to let you know, in case you are only publishing ebooks, this video is specific to physical books. And if you've never published before, honestly, you probably have never thought about your book size. I know that I never did, but if you don't have the right size for your genre, your book is going to stick out like a sore thumb on the shelf. I will talk all about that and give you some personal examples from my experience. And then also, in some cases, it can even be such an issue that your publishing on demand company will reject your book because of the size. So I'm gonna dive into all of that. Let's get into it. Choosing the right size for your book. The size of your book matters to your readers, first of all, because of genre expectations. So I have this lovely stack here of books to give you an example. Let's start with the smallest ones. These cute little guys they're roughly 7 by 4. Then we've got a typical paperback in YA, which is 8 by 5.25. Here is the Stolen Kingdom hardcover, if anyone is wondering. I know it's 8 by 5, but because it's a hardcover, the hardcover is actually adding a little lip on this side and this side, so it's actually adding length to it. So online it's 8 by 5, but here it is 8.25 by 5 and 5.25 also, it looks like. Here's another book in YA that was slightly different from mine. This one is exactly 8.5 by, I want to say it would be 5.5, but because it's hardcover, it's getting closer to 6. It's like 5.75. It's very minimal. You're gonna see the difference at the top, just barely, sticking out just a bit in the back. Then got your 6 by 9, I believe, I'm guessing here. Oh, it's even bigger because it's hardcover. So this is 9.5 by 6.5. This is another example where self-published authors can accidentally come across as unprofessional because your book, if it's not the same size as other books in the genre, it's going to stand out and not in a good way. And I promised you guys I would give you a personal example, so without further ado, here is my debut copy of Evelyn's Number, and here is my second edition. I'm gonna do a close-up so that you can see them side by side, and you can see how this one, the first one, is a 6 by 9, and the second one is a 5 by 8. And here's the funny part, you guys. This is the exact same book. I did not change a single word on these pages besides writing second edition instead of first. So I mentioned in the beginning that the DIYbookformats.com comes in a 6 by 9, which is this. This is what I used. I didn't know how to change it at the time, so I'm going to show you guys how to change it so you can make your book smaller without actually changing the word count or anything else at all. Before I do that though, I think it's important to explain a little bit more about how your book's size actually affects the cost of the book, of printing the book. So it also affects your royalties as an author, and it affects how much your reader is going to pay for the book. Let's pretend that I'm selling both of these books for an even $10, okay? And let's say that this was $6 to print, while this one over here was $3.50, so it's half as expensive. Actually, I think this one's closer to 4, but I don't actually remember, so we're gonna make up numbers. So you've got your $6 taken out of 10, and that leaves only $4 left for you and your print-on-demand company to split. With paperbacks, I believe it is a 60-40 split, so you get 60% of that. If I did the math right, you would be making $2.40 for every one of these books sold in this size. Now, let's take the same book, but I have made it smaller, and let's say it costs $3.50 to print this. So now you and the publisher have $6.50 to split between you. Let's do the math again. This book is going to make $3.90 for every book that you sell. That might not seem like much, but then multiply that by, 100 book sales or 200 book sales or 500 book sales, and you can see how it very quickly adds up. So that is why smaller books are better for you as a self-published author. And I'm not just talking about size, because actually this size doesn't matter nearly as much as page count. So we're going to talk a lot more about how to have less pages at the end of this video, because that is also going to save you a lot of money as well. But now let's talk about how this affects your reader, because let's say now that I want to make that $3.90 that I would get from this book on this book? Well, the only way to do that would be to raise the price of this book. And that is why readers usually have to pay more for bigger books and also more for hardcovers, which are also more expensive. And that is another good reason to consider trying to make your book smaller to save money for your reader as well. Then you don't have to price the book nearly as high. Okay, so how do you choose the right book size for your book specifically? My first recommendation is always to look at what's most common in your genre. So what I did is I actually took a look at the books on my shelf. I did physically measure a lot of the books in my genre. I took notes and I tried to figure out what was the most common size. When you're measuring, you're gonna measure across and from top to bottom. Don't worry about measuring the width of the book because that is going to be affected by how many pages you have, and so that is something we're going to talk about at the end that's totally separate. Go to your preferred print-on-demand company, whether it's KDP or Ingram Spark or somewhere else that you would like to print your books, and take a look at the options they have on their site because not every publisher has the same sizing options. But for right now, let's just say that we've decided on a 5x8, which is what this is, and we need a template that is 5x8 so that we can upload our book correctly to the vendor. I'm going to show you how to resize it if you want to just take your document as is and make it the correct size, but I would also first like to show you two different template options that you could do that might be even faster and even easier for you. The first one is actually KDP, and they offer a bunch of different templates. So I'll link this page below on their paperback manuscript templates, and they actually have right here a download button where you can download templates that help you with the formatting, and they give you a bunch of different sizes, as you can see right here. They also actually tell you quite a bit more about front matter and chapter pages, page numbers. They even give you a checklist for publishing, so this is a really valuable page that KDP provides for free, along with a video that you can watch if you want to know more. Once you know what size you want, you can click this download button and you can get a template in the exact trim size that you are looking for. And then you can copy and paste your manuscript over into that template. The second option is, of course, that DIYbookformats.com template that I've talked about throughout this series, and I want to give a huge shout out to Derek Murphy for making that and making it free for authors because it really is a lifesaver. But like I mentioned, that came in the specific 6x9 size right here, which is fine. That could work for a lot of people, but for a lot of other authors that might not fit your genre and you might need to resize it. So that leads to the next part, which is how to resize your book in Word. So I'm going to walk you through how to do that really quick. All right, you're going to go to Format. You're going to go down to Document because you're changing the entire document. This little pop-up has a lot of handy information like your margins, and it has your headers and footer information. But for right now, we're actually going to click this little option at the bottom that says Page Setup. This is where you will see your paper size. So if you're doing a standard printer size, it's going to say in most Word documents, regular page. And then you can see all the different sizes that I have tested out here. So we're going to click Manage Custom Sizes. Now, the Stolen Kingdom, the interior is actually slightly larger to make sure things like the map don't have any awkward white spacing along the edges of the book. So this map is actually slightly larger, and when it's printed, it's cut off at the 5x8 mark, which is what I uploaded, when in reality, the document is slightly bigger than 5x8. I hope that makes sense. I don't know if I'm explaining that very well, but this is my actual document size. If any of you want to also add images like a map or other things with that bleed feature, we are going to do an entire video on it. So let's say I want to make a new custom size for an 8x8 children's book, for example. I'm going to click the little plus sign. I'm going to, you see how at the top there it says paper size 8.5 by 11. That's your average printer size. So we'll change it to 8x8. And then I would like to title it. So if you double click, you can say children's book. I'm doing this one-handed for some reason. Enter. And now when I click OK, you're going to see it's labeled children's book, the name that I gave it, and it's 8x8 inches. So you can actually create a bunch of different sizes if you would like to test out which one looks the best to you as well. Once you have your size, you're going to click OK. And now this is a really important thing to notice. Right now, it's only applying this to a specific section, which means the entire book is not going to change. You have to click that and choose whole document to make sure that the entire book is reformatted to the size that you want instead of just half of it. Once you have that, click OK. And now if you look at the left side here, this is now a square. It is an 8x8. Look at that cute thing. Let's zoom out so you can get a better visual of it. This is the same template that we downloaded from DIYbookformats.com, but it is now an 8x8 square, like a children's book size. All right, now it's time for my 3 formatting secrets on how to save even more pages and, as a result, even more money. So I'm going to take you to the Enchanted Crown, which is currently, if you look at the very bottom left here, 561 pages. Right next to that is the word count, which is about 92,000 almost. And so obviously a lot of YA novels out there are around this word count and they are not nearly as many pages. And that is thanks to formatting and saving money. So I am going to show you exactly what I do to take off a couple hundred pages actually. Step 1 is going to seem very obvious to those of you who have ever done this in school, and that is changing the font size. In this case, we're going to make the font size a little bit smaller. So under the format option at the top, you're going to go ahead and just click font. And this is going to show you that the standard size is 12-point font right here. But actually, because we're in a template, I want to make sure that I'm changing the entire document at once. So you could either control all, but because I have my chapter headers in there, which are different, and I don't want to change the size on them, I want to specifically change the font size for what's called the main body of my story itself. Let me pause really quick and say that I promise you I will talk more about fonts and the sizes and the style pane, which is where I'm at on the top right here right now, and I will talk more about how this works. But for right now, I'm just going to show you how I change it by clicking right click and modify. And so right now you'll see that in the DIYbookformats.com template that I use, the font size right here in the middle is 12, which by the way is, in my opinion, really large for a novel. The average novel size for my research is actually an 11-point font, but in my case, I actually go just slightly smaller, it's almost unnoticeable, to a 10.5 font. So that is actually the font in all of my books in the Stolen Kingdom series, and I have never once had a reader notice or complain. When I click OK, this is going to adjust the entire manuscript because it's adjusting all of the main body. So let me show you what that looks like. You saw that tiny little jump there. Now it went from, what was it, 560 something pages to 460 something pages. So we have just taken this novel down by 100 pages simply by changing the font size. That's amazing all by itself, but the second change is going to do probably just as many pages. Let's find out. So you're gonna right click on main body again and click modify, or if you're not working in a template and you haven't yet set up your chapter headers, you could just do Control All to select the entire novel. We're in the same place as before, but this time in that bottom left corner where it says format, we're gonna click that and choose paragraph. There's a lot going on in here. You can change your justification, which we talked about in the 10 basic rules of formatting, and you can change that the first line is indented and by how much. But in this case, we're gonna look right here at the bottom right at the line spacing. So right now it is 1.4 in the template that I use. It might be different if you are using a different template for you, but I'm gonna change it to 1.15. Now watch closely as I click OK at what this does. Now we are at 388 pages. So almost 100 pages again, about 80 pages roughly, were just removed. We just took the novel down almost 200 pages, and that word count didn't change one bit. Not a single word was removed. The third and final step is one that I typically do in Adobe Acrobat, which is right here, and that is to convert my Word document to a PDF file. And I know for a fact that that's going to remove pages, but I've had people tell me that you can convert your Word document to a PDF directly in Word. So first I'm going to test that just to see if you can also change the page count. So I'm gonna click Save As, and then under the file format there is this option to export it to a PDF. So we're gonna try that. Let's see how many pages this gives me. And this is totally in Adobe Acrobat, by the way. Woo, I'm not liking what happens here on the side. I don't know what that's all about. So 388 pages. So this is why I am gonna delete that. That is why I do not use the convert option in Word, although maybe there's a workaround. But I'm just gonna show you how I use Adobe Acrobat. This is super easy. I've been doing this for a couple years now. I click Create PDF, and I'm gonna go grab my latest version of the Enchanted Crown, the one that we were just working on with 388 pages. This is the online version of Adobe Acrobat, and so if you look at the very bottom right here, it now says 365 pages. I believe if we had 388, we've gotten rid of 23 pages through converting it to a PDF. And that's pretty impressive. If you remember, we started out with, I think, roughly 200 pages more than that. So just these 3 secrets have helped me to remove 200 plus pages. I just wanted to show you the Enchanted Crown so you could see just how drastic of a difference this can make. So for readers who are asking me to make a thicker book, don't worry, it already is the biggest book in all 4 books in the series, but I am trying my best not to make it a huge monster of a book because I also want to save you money, and I want to save me money, and I want to actually make money. So that is why the size of your book matters so much. And don't go anywhere because there's one other reason that a PDF is super important. It's not really to do with sizing, but I don't know where else to put it in this series, so I'm just gonna say it at the end of this video, which is that a PDF is the highly preferred format for print-on-demand companies when you're uploading to KDP or to Ingram Spark or wherever else as a print book. It doesn't really matter with ebook, but when you have a print book, they really want you to have a PDF. It's going to make the print quality so much better, and it's going to avoid a lot of issues that you might have if you upload a Word document, including some wonky formatting that might come into play if you don't convert it to a PDF. So you'll see when you're uploading to those vendors that they do recommend you do a PDF, and this is how I specifically do it, but of course you could play around how to convert to a PDF directly in Word as well. Hopefully this video has helped you decide the right size for your book and helped you figure out how to do that really smoothly and saved you money in the process. So now I'm going to go on to the next video in the series, which is choosing the fonts for your book and also setting up the style pane to help you format your book much quicker. We are going to talk about how to choose the main font for your book, as well as other potential fonts for things like chapter headers, for example, as well as how to set up a style pane in Word specifically, and how that can help you to make changes all at once instead of painstakingly going through your novel one change at a time. You can make all of the changes throughout the entire novel with one click. Some of the things in this video might affect ebooks, but most of it is going to be really specific to print especially. So let's start with choosing your font. The first thing that you should know, the #1 rule, is that your font should not be taking away from the story itself. So that means avoid at all costs the crazy fonts with the curly cues, and I don't know what the professional word is for them, but do not go overboard with the font. In fact, the honest truth is that you can't go wrong with something like Times New Roman. One of the biggest mistakes that self-published authors make here is they want to stand out and be unique, so they try to choose a really, special font. But the truth is that you don't want your readers to be more interested in the font than in the story itself. So if your font is distracting a reader from the story, that is a bad sign. You can definitely use some of the fonts that you already have in Word, or if you use that DIYbookformats.com template that I am always talking about throughout this series, that comes with a font called Junicode and a couple others that are super awesome that you can download, and that you'll be walked through that entire process if you download that template. But you can also go to a website like DaFont, I believe it's called. Yes, there it is. And this is where you can download different fonts. So this is what I'm talking about where I say avoid at all costs doing the fancy stuff, at least for your novel itself, for the story itself. Go towards basics. Like for example, this column says sans serif or regular serif. Let's go ahead and click on that just for some examples. So it's gonna be, even that feels way too fancy to me. Something very, see these, like maybe this one right here, or maybe that one. Something that is like, right here, that feels very basic. Something that's not going to draw the reader's eye is your goal when it comes to your book itself. When it comes to gorgeous chapter headers, on the other hand, that might be an instance where you do want to draw the reader's eye, and you might pick a fancier font in that case. So you could go over to would not do cartoon. Actually, those are kind of adorable. Oh, so cute. But that leads to my second tip. Don't just pick something because you like it. It's really important to pick something that fits your genre. Oh my goodness, not these. No, 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 no. Wizards, magic? Maybe. If I'm in YA fantasy with magic, something that looks like this could actually look really cool. And you might have to download and test some fonts to see, but that leads to my third tip, which is making sure that you are allowed to use that font, which means essentially, what's the word that I want? Not public domain. There's a specific word that I want right now. Ah, here we go, commercial use. Don't mind me using Google to show you guys how I do my research, but honestly, this is the type of stuff that you want to do. Like, do I have the legal rights to use a font? Do your research and figure out if the font is copyrighted, which means no, you do not have the right to use just any font that's out there. But there are some that are available for what's called commercial use, which means that any project where you're making money off of it, you're okay to use this font. And in some cases, you might have to purchase the rights to that font. While in other cases, like I believe DaFont, yes, it says free for personal use on the right side here. That's one other important thing that I wanted to really hit home on, is that you want to make sure you have commercial rights to use it. And so choosing a font can take as long or as short as you want it to. You can go super basic with Times New Roman, or maybe use the font that comes in one of the templates that I showed you earlier in this series, such as the DIYbookformats.com template uses Junicode, as you'll see on the top left here. And so this is what I personally use, but you can definitely play around, try different things and explore. Just keep in mind those basic principles of, number one, not distracting a reader and keeping it very, very simple and straightforward and professional looking. Try to look at the books on your shelf. I know I say this in every single formatting video, but really do study the books in your genre. None of them are gonna look really crazy. But when it comes to chapter headers, you might find some really gorgeous, unique scripts. So you can definitely do your research and explore those to have some more exciting elements in your book if you want. Just keep it calm when it comes to the story itself. Those are my tips for fonts, but then the other half of this video is equally important, which is how to set up a style pane so that you don't have to go through your document, you know, line by line and change things one chapter at a time, which is horrible, huge waste of time, huge headache. I'm gonna zoom way in on chapter 1 and give you a tiny sneak peek of the Enchanted Crown here. At least as of recording in January, it's still 2 months from release, keep that in mind. Say you want to change the font of the story itself, but you do not want to change the font for the header or the subtitles or any of that jazz. So a lot of self-published authors will go and they will, you know, hold it down and control all throughout chapter 1, change chapter 1, and control all chapter 2, change chapter 2. That is a huge waste of time and a huge headache. So I'm going to show you how to do this much quicker. In the DIYbookformats.com template, you've got some styles set up. So I'm going to show you first how to change what's already set up, but then I'm also going to show you how to set up styles in the first place if you want to create your own template. So you're going to right click and you're going to click modify. So here's the Junicode font that we talked about, and like we talked about in other videos in the series, here's the font size, here's the justification. You can bold it if you want to. You can set up some first paragraph styles, and you can click this little box on the bottom to get even deeper into it, into things like the paragraph and whatnot. So let's take a look specifically at the font. And right now you're gonna see a really cute little preview of what the current font is, but let's say that I wanna change this to one of the fonts that are set up in Word. And so obviously Times New Roman is the one that I've been recommending to you guys. So let's go ahead and find that. There it is. Okay. Now it's funny because I believe the preview updates no matter what. Let's find out. Let's do another one and see if it updates. Yep. Oh, that's a pretty font. That one is more fancy, but I really like it. We're gonna try changing the chapter to that in a minute. But let's go really basic, because I really do recommend that your main story font is not crazy. So this one barely changed at all. Junicode and Times New Roman look super similar to me. And I'm gonna click okay. And there you go. I'm gonna do a backspace. There's the Junicode. It's so small of a difference. It honestly looks almost exactly the same to me. I'm not gonna lie. So just to give you an example of why you could just absolutely use the Times New Roman that you have. But now let's do chapter 1. And now this on the top left is Steelfish. I'm gonna say rig, even though that's not probably how you say it. But you guys saw that I really liked that other one under the T's. So I'm gonna scroll down. Was it this one? I think so. Ooh, that's so pretty. Oh my gosh. All right, so I was testing it on just chapter 1 here. Ooh, chapter 3, 4, those didn't change. That's a perfect example of how I don't want to go through all 53 of these and change them all. So I'm gonna go ahead and undo that. And obviously it's not gonna change the writing itself, just keep that in mind. But I'm gonna go ahead and find, where is my header? Right here. We are currently working in heading 1. So I'm gonna right click, modify, just like last time. And within the fonts here, although you probably could change it up there as well, I'm gonna go ahead and find that gorgeous font that I really, really like. I'm probably gonna go with this, you guys. I think it's gorgeous. Ooh, that just looks so good. I really like that. All right, I'm clicking OK. And OK again. And now, of course, like I said, they're not gonna add in the writing for you, but now that chapter 2, chapter 3, that's a different font. Look at that gorgeousness. Oh my goodness. So I still have to actually put in the writing itself, but isn't that beautiful? Let me give you a better example with the epilogue, because that's gonna be an actual word. So that was changed. I didn't do any changing. All of the headers in the entire document were changed for me, including this one that I need to work on and my note from the author that I might want to add. Just, oh my gosh. I just really love that. That looks so good. This right here, when I click through the style pane, I find that this one is currently labeled as a quote. So let's pretend. I kind of like that style. I like the subtitle to be a little more flowy right next to the really straightforward font. They look really, really nice together. And that's Open Sans, if I'm saying that right. But let's go ahead and play around with that as well, just to give you an example of how you can play with this. So under that, do I want to make it exactly the same? I don't know. Obviously changing the entire manuscript is a little more complex, so I might suggest playing with the like a sentence level at a time until you find something you like and then doing this change. But just for kicks, oh, look at that. See, it shows you in the preview, so you don't actually have to make the change if you're like, no, I don't like it. But you can see that the font style does have italics on it right now, and it is a little bit bigger than the story itself. So if you want to, you can play around like this. What is wingdings? No. Ooh, that is also gorgeous. Okay, now technically this is book 4 in the series, and I like to keep my books consistent if possible. So this is something I did a little bit more with book 1, and then I want to probably keep most of my books consistent throughout. But just for kicks, let's try it out because that's beautiful. Now, see, I don't like that. I think I'm gonna keep it as is. I don't wanna go too crazy, but I just wanted to show you guys. Okay, so now let me show you with a brand new blank template. So you'll notice that Word actually does put in some styles in the style pane right here already. And if you wanted to, you could just take what's already in here. So you got a title, then you've got your content. You could use what they have in here. Is there a main body? Let's see. Yeah, normal. So if you wanted to, you could change the styles that are already in there, or you could actually add a new style. Let's start with same concept where we change it. So let's say we want the main body of our book to be Times New Roman. Come back. I saw you. Where'd you go? There it is. And we want it to be smaller, that's standard 11 point, let's say. And I would like to name this, because I'm used to seeing main body, I'd like to name it main body, because that's what it is. And I'm gonna click OK. I wanted to make sure it was working, so I went even smaller here. Okay, it's working. I am so not used to seeing a document this big, you guys. It's creeping me out. Okay, so let's set up our chapter header. So this is right now the title. Let's make it even bigger because it's a book title. Maybe not that big, that's kind of huge. And let's make it that one that we were admiring because it's so pretty. And then let's make it centered. Where is it? Right there. So this is changing all headers going forward. I'll show you what that means in a second. Let's click OK. So now let's make this chapter 1. Okay, and then we've got our content. In the last video in this series, I'm going to show you how to put everything that I've been talking about together and format everything with those 10 basic rules, the font size, the chapter headers, you name it, all of that from scratch. I'm gonna put it all together, but for right now, we're gonna move on because you can see how setting up the style pane here is as easy as clicking modify and then playing around. But the last thing I wanna point out is you can right click the style pane and you could actually add a brand new style by clicking this button right here. So you can name it, I'm gonna name it Bethany style because it's, you know, real fancy. And currently my style is definitely this font. I just love it so much. And I don't know, I'm feeling like my style's really huge. So you get the idea. This is how you create styles in the style pane. And then the way it becomes applicable is, for example, if I'm writing content and I'm writing stuff, and let's say I have, you know, an actual book with tons of content. We're obviously never gonna do this. This is breaking tons of formatting rules. But instead of me going one by one and fixing these chapter headers one by one, I can simply update that style of the chapter header at the top and change everything in one big go. So let's pretend I want all of the chapter headers to be tiny little baby chapter headers. Boom. Updated all of them throughout the entire manuscript. You saw that in the Enchanted Crown, I have 53 chapters. It's a big book with a lot of character POVs. I do not have to go through every single one of those one at a time. I make one change and they are all updated. That was a lot of info, I know. So like I said, at the end of this formatting series, I'm gonna bring it all together, but I wanted you to have a really solid understanding of fonts and how to choose the best ones for your novel, and then also how to set up the style pane. I hope this has helped you feel more confident about the styles and the fonts that you choose. And so now we're gonna go into the next video in this series, which is adding images to your book with something called the bleed feature. And no, I did not make that up. That's actually what it's called. I'll explain why in a second. But the reason this is so valuable for self-published authors to know is that knowing how to put an image in your book can help you put in simple things like your title page or your author photo, or things that are more complicated if you know how to use the bleed feature, such as a book map or character art or tons of other fun things that we're going to go into in this video today. We're going to start with the things that are easier, and then we'll move into the more complicated side of things, which is that bleed feature that I mentioned. I'm going to show you the Enchanted Crown. So this, what you see here, is actually a photo. So this is what's called a PNG file, which means that it's not a full square photo, it's just the font. That makes sense. Look into PNG if you don't know what I'm talking about. And so let's pretend it's not there and I want to insert it. I'm going to click insert at the top left here. I'm going to go down to the picture option and I'm going to take a picture from my file. I get asked about this gorgeous font that I'm about to show you whenever I post pictures of my book on Instagram, but the thing is that this is not a font that I am typing in myself. This is specifically from my cover designer. For example, that is the font for the Stolen Kingdom book, and this is that exact same font, but of course in black instead of in gold, on the inside of the book. So to insert it, you're literally just going to click your photo. But as you can see already, it's not exactly the placement that it was before, and it's also the wrong size. So the next thing you want to do is when you click on it, you can grab the corners and you can make it larger. But now you'll notice that it is going off the page. So to fix that, you're going to right click. You're going to go down to the wrap text option. Usually I just click one of these. Now once you have a wrap text feature, whatever feature you picked on it, you can now click that same thing, right click, wrap text, and over down at the very bottom, fix position on page. And now, see this little anchor at the top there? Whenever you put your picture somewhere, that's where it's going to stay. You have the room to maneuver it around on the page. So now I like to put it kind of in the center there. But you have to keep the margins, the printing margins, in mind. You can't make it too big. So I'll kind of play with it. And it does have a little bit of white space on the edges of it anyway. But if I am ever wondering, you know, how is this going to print, you can look at this thumbnail size over here, or you can zoom out and look at it and think, okay, that looks pretty good. I feel like, you know, you could even mess with it from here and make it a little bit smaller. Now let's go to the end of the book. I don't want you guys to be able to read it, so I'm shrinking it way down. But typically with my front and back matter at this point, I just copy and paste it from a previous book into the new book and play with that. But for the sake of this video, I'm going to show you how I add. I'm going to go back to insert, picture, picture from file, and we're gonna add my author bio picture. I'm gonna add in a black and white author bio picture. So my next tip for you is make sure that the photos that you include are black and white, unless you wanna pay more for printing. But let's say, for example, you don't have a black and white photo and you don't know how to make your author photo or a different, maybe a character art photo, black and white. It's very easy. You would want to probably duplicate it instead of changing your original. And once you have a duplicate, you're gonna go into Adjust Color. And then within the Adjust Color option, saturation means color. So you're going to simply remove it, bring it all the way to the side, and now you have a black and white photo. If you wanted to, you could also play with the contrast, exposure, highlights, shadows, etc. But honestly, if you have a quality photo already, you just need to make it black and white. Don't forget to save it as the black and white option, and then you can go ahead and add that to your document. All right, so that's your basic way to insert photos. But now what about inserting photos that you want to go all the way to the edge of the page, AKA past the margins? Because if you don't do the specific step I'm about to teach you, your print-on-demand company would reject something like this. It would say, no, this photo is going outside of the margins, it's outside of the safe printing area, and they would automatically reject something like this and not allow you to print your book. So to get something like a book map, or even something like another book cover or a character art that extends past the acceptable margins, that safe area that I mentioned to you, you're gonna have to use something called the bleed feature. And I hinted at this at the beginning of the video, and I mentioned very clearly that I did not come up with this. But the idea of the bleed feature is that it simply means you're letting that print-on-demand company know that you're okay with the image bleeding off the page, going into the margins, outside of the safe area, into that bleed zone, so to speak. And the first step to do this, which I hinted at when we talked about resizing your book, is that you actually need to choose an interior size that is slightly larger than your exterior size. So this book is printed on the print-on-demand company as a 5x8, but when I go into my Word document, now you're seeing my screen, we're back in the Enchanted Crown, which is currently, I believe, a 5x8, which is not correct for the bleed feature. When I want to add the book map to this, if I submitted it to the print-on-demand company as is, as an 8x5, they would reject it. So what I'm gonna do is go over to Document, and then you're gonna click on Page Setup. Now this is what I showed you in the video all about sizing and resizing your book. So right now it says it's sized for a 5x8, and that's the title that I gave it, but it also says 5.00 by 8.00 inches here at the bottom as well. So what I'm gonna do is click on that, scroll down. I'm sorry, I have so many things in here that you can't even see the button I'm gonna click, but it says Manage Custom Sizes. So we're gonna click on that. You can see that I've made some custom sizes here on the left already, and I'm gonna show you in a second how to do this. But first, let me take you over to the internet to KDP, where I actually learned all about the bleed feature. I would highly recommend you scroll through this and you do some research on it, because they describe the bleed feature right here, and they give you a lot of information about it, as well as some mistakes that might happen. And then they help you go in and how to calculate both your cover size and your interior formatting size. So that's where we're gonna go and focus on right down here in the interior specifications. If you have no bleed, you don't need to put in a map or anything that's going to go outside the margins. You just use the size that you actually want your book to be. But if you want to include bleed, this is where they give you information. To extend it by 0.125 inches beyond the actual trim size, if you want to know more, there's tons and tons and tons of information here that I think is going to be really valuable to you. But we're going to keep this surface level, and I'm just going to go ahead and go back to Word and show you how to do this. I made a bunch of them here. Okay, so that's not right. I'm going to delete that. Okay, and this one says it's 5x8, but it's actually the correct size as well. And this one says actual 5x8, so that I could differentiate. So I think I'm just gonna delete that one too. So this was me testing, figuring it out. You can play with it, and then once you get it to the size that you want, you can always go and check if you have, oops, cancel. I almost forgot. I almost always do this where I forget to change it to the whole document. That leads to my final tip, which is to always order a proof copy. You would want to do that anyway. I always recommend ordering a proof copy, because you might be surprised by some unexpected formatting things that happen that do not look good when you see your physical copy of your book. But in this specific instance, it can be especially finicky and you can have some very unexpected surprises, things that do not look right. And so I always recommend ordering a proof copy, which is exactly what it sounds like, a copy of your book that you proofread before you publish. That way you don't have any awkward moments when your book is published and it looks terrible. Even if it ends up turning out amazing, it's always good to order it just to be safe. And then also, of course, you can use that proof copy to proofread it, which is what it's for in the first place. So if you want to know more about proof copies, I have an entire video all about how I do proof copies and where you can order them and how you can set that up. I will add that to the formatting playlist series below if you want to watch that after this video. As you can see, adding images is trickier than you would think, so I hope this video has made it smoother for you. If you do add images to your book, I would love to see them. If you ever want to tag me on Instagram. And this video is also going to be closely connected to the next video in this series on chapter headers and making chapter header images that might even include artwork that are especially fancy. While a font can be absolutely gorgeous, sometimes you want to do a little bit extra because chapter headers, there are some that are just stunning and they look really gorgeous, and so it can be fun in self-publishing to kind of attempt to do some of these fancier formatting styles when it comes to chapter headers. If you are here with me watching this video, then you and I are feeling a little bit extra, and so maybe you want a huge image that takes up the entire top of the page, or even a 2-page spread, or maybe you just want something dainty and just a cute little extra flair of like a swirl or something on the chapter header page. Whatever the case may be, we're gonna go a little above and beyond your simple fonts today. This is where formatting finally gets to pull from all of your creative genes and we get to do something a little more exciting. Obviously, when you're doing something like this, there's going to be less rules and that can be a little bit overwhelming. So I'm going to try to give you some fun examples of each of the different types of things you could try. And of course, as always, I'm going to highly recommend that you take a look at the books on your shelf and study your genre and what's most common in your specific genre to maybe give you some ideas as well of how you could be creative in this particular area. Before I actually show you anything though, I think it's really important to mention that what I'm first going to show you is specific to physical books and not ebooks. And then at the end of this video, I'm going to show you what I do for ebooks. That's also a really cool chapter header option, but very separate from physical books. So this is where our paths, if we're doing both of them, are going to split. And you're going to do one thing for physical books and one thing for ebooks, okay? Just throwing that out there, and I will show you both, I promise. I'm talking about my hands a lot in this video. I'm getting a little energetic. I think the coffee is kicking in. Whew. Okay, so we're gonna start by taking a little trip over to a free website called Canva, where we can create all kinds of gorgeous chapter headers and input them as an image into the chapter. This is a free website where you can create all kinds of things. I have an entire video about how I use Canva as an author. I'll add that to this playlist in the links below if you want to watch it. But today I'm going to show you specifically, of course, chapter headers. So you can play around with the different sizes. If you want to avoid more complicated formatting like that bleed feature that I mentioned in the last video, you could do a much smaller image so that it stays within the margins of the book and you don't have to worry about the bleed feature and setting all that up. Or if you want to do something really snazzy, you could do something that's like a box size that's going to cover the entire first half of your book's page, or even, like I said, a 2-page spread. You could even go into, I think there's a Wattpad book one in here. Hold on. Okay, so you can click on templates and you could browse by category. I am pretty sure there is a book template in here. Let me see if I can find it. There we go. So we've got book cover, but then I could swear to you that there's also a Wattpad book cover in here somewhere, but whatever, let's just go with this because that's like your generic, like it's the right size for standard-ish page. So if, for example, you want to do a 2-page spread, this could be the left side that's just artwork, and then on the right side is like a half artwork, and then the other half would be the story beginning, obviously. This size feels almost like the top half of a book page, so let's go for it. So then the next step is to decide if you want to start with a template that maybe has a font that you like. So you could browse, you could be like, oh, that's totally what I want. And you can delete some things, but keep the font that you like, for example. Or you can start with a blank template, which is what we're gonna do. The next step is, of course, adding your text, because typically the first thing you're gonna need for a chapter header is the chapter name. And you, of course, could browse all the options on the left here for stuff that's a little bit more unique. Or in this case, again, we're just gonna pop it in with your basic one and go from there. So you could just literally have the number 1, or you could write out chapter in the number 1, or you could even write out the entire thing, chapter 1, like that. And then when you want to change it, you go into all the fonts here and you can play around with all the different styles and you can just explore. So these are going to give you more styles than you probably have in Word, and you don't have to download individual font styles because you're doing an image. If you click at the top, it's going to give you some options where you can narrow it down. So if you really want specifically a handwriting look, there's corporate, there's some really fancy stuff, more header, paragraph, sans serif, so on and so on and so on. Ooh, vintage. That looks fun. If you know that one of these fits with the vibe of your genre, that can also help you kind of narrow down what exactly you want to do. Futuristic would be really great for sci-fi. Let's pretend we're writing a sci-fi book, and we're gonna do, some of it's kind of strange. This gives you an idea. That one's really strange. Okay, so we're doing our sci-fi book. Let's scroll through. Let's say we do this because I like how the T is bigger. It's one of these little details that makes a book look more professional because it's not over the top, but it's also not something that you're gonna just pop out in Word. You know what I mean? It's that perfect balance between too crazy and crazy enough, I guess. I don't know. So your first step, of course, you could resize this just like you do all other images, and you can drag it around so that you can place it in the middle. Canva's gonna help you with these little purple lines, so you can see how it's helping me center it perfectly in the middle there. And if you wanted to, you could stop here and you could have this gorgeous thing, just a really big font that's unique, and you could download it and put it in the top of your chapter, which again, you can watch that video on how to insert images if you want to do that step. Or you could take it to the next level. So let's do that. The next level in my mind is adding subtle details. So let's do, for example, in the elements section, if you click on that tab, there are little doodads, that's the professional word for it, like these lines here. There are also a ton of other options. You could go crazy. You could just explore this all day. You might not have all day. So let's think, what's a good sci-fi element? Spaceship, I guess? Oh my gosh. All right, so I have Canva Pro. I recently finally upgraded. Not an advertisement, I just really love Canva. But let's say that you don't want to pay for it, you just want a free image. You can go ahead and search through. Here's a free image right here. Oh my gosh, that's adorable. That's a little bit more almost middle grade feeling to me, and also it's in color. So what we might want to do, I'm going to delete that. And I'm gonna look for one that lets me change the colors. What's this? Nope. Okay, so this one's not nearly as exciting, but in that top corner here, you can see that it's green right now, but it lets you change it to black. Now it's something that can work in a print book, so I could also make it smaller. You can use the little rotate option to do stuff like that. So again, you might be surprised when you first see something and think that's not gonna work, but then when you pop it in, that looks really classy. Does that not look amazing to you? That looks amazing to me. So sometimes the simpler stuff can really pop and look amazing. Let's delete that and I'll show you what a pro option is. So this one, I personally think this is adorable. You can overlap things if you want, which is one of the nice things. If you were using font in your computer plus an image, like you just had this rocket, you could not easily overlap things. You could, but it'd be difficult. Versus here, you can put it wherever you want. Oh my gosh, how cute would it be if this was the number 1? Does it fit there? Oh my gosh. Now, of course, we have to remember our 10 basic formatting rules, and number 10 was consistency. So this would be very difficult to keep consistent through all the chapters since there's not an O in every chapter name. But I just gotta say, that looks adorable. Does that not look really cute? And then of course, since a book does not usually print in color, we just have to do a little bit of fiddling here to turn it into something printable. There you go. Now it's in black and white. Oh my gosh. That is the cutest. Now I'm gonna show you what I do when I find something I like, but I'm not necessarily done. I'm gonna go ahead and click this little guy at the top. I'm calling it a little guy because I don't know, but it's duplicate. And now I have two options. So let's delete that, or actually I take it back. You can always backspace. Maybe I wanna compare having a really big spaceship going, I don't know, sideways. This looks not as good to me, but you know, let's go with it. And I want to compare these two side by side. So down here at the bottom, you could, first of all, I should point out that you can zoom out, but the second thing you can do is compare them side by side, just like this. Well, I wish I was writing a sci-fi book because I just found my chapter header. And of course, this far right button, you can even zoom in and take a really close-up look at it. Say that maybe it's a little grainier than you expected, you could pick a different image, and then you click escape. I'm gonna zoom back in so we can look a little closer. One other thing that I played with a lot when I was testing out things for the Stolen Kingdom that I still would like to do someday is an element that covers the top half of the page. I should gesture in Canva. So it covers this part, and it's sort of like a fading image, but I had trouble finding the right images in Canva. I remember I looked at clouds. Yeah, that's not gonna work. Actually, something like this. I didn't used to have Pro, so I didn't want to do something like this, but look how adorable this is. And of course, you can see right now this isn't working, but if I click position, bring that forward, now my chapter 1 is on top. I personally don't think that's super exciting, but it gives you an example of how you could have your image go out to the edge of the page. Here's another one. Let's try this guy. Yeah, I think that looks really strange. Okay, keep in mind a lot of the stuff that I'm picking is Pro because it's just prettier, but you can definitely play around and use some of the free stuff. So, oh my gosh, that's kind of cool. See, now I don't think these go well together, but it gives you an example of how you could have a really fun image. Actually, hold up. It's still not really the right genres put together, but it's kind of a nice little base. See, look at that. And then what you're gonna do, of course, like I said, is download that image and input it into your book with that inserting images option that I described to you guys. Ooh, here's a free option. Let me show you how to do this. Okay, let's delete the cloud. This is a strange color. It doesn't really work with black, so let's darken it up a little bit, and let's grab this and swivel it around. Come on, work with me. Bring it all the way to the top of the page. And I don't know if I love that. Now it's a little bit too dark, so let's play with it, bring it back down. Oh, here's the problem. It's actually in front. Let's put it backwards. Could make it a color, but of course, your book's not gonna be printed in color, so I would suggest avoiding that. Just do grayscale options. And then now for something like this that's extending all the way to the edges of the page, you're going to use that bleed feature that I mentioned, but this can look really professional. Not necessarily this picture, but a picture like this that extends out to the edges of the page and is really interesting. The last thing I want to show you is if you decide to work with an artist who actually, you know, creates what's it called, custom artwork for you and for your book. Now, I hesitated to mention this because if you are doing the formatting yourself, most likely you're trying to save money, and if you hire an artist to do artwork for every single chapter, that's not necessarily going to save you a lot of money. That's going to make it back to being kind of expensive. But maybe you hire an artist to do just one artwork that you're going to put on every chapter, or you could actually pay for some of these designs in Canva for a one-time use as well. All right, so what I'm gonna do is I have some really, really cool character art that you guys have seen. I'm gonna pretend, even though this is not a good fit size-wise, because this is a very tall character, I'm gonna pretend that I wanna add in Ari as one of my chapter header images here. So this is by Ingrid Nordley, shout out to Ingrid, and actually this is not a PNG. Let me delete that. So this is the original color, okay? We're gonna have to go to filter and turn it to grayscale. Then I'm gonna make it smaller, and this font is just not fantasy font at all, but I'm gonna bring it to the front as always, and I'm gonna kind of try to make it look like Ari is sitting on it, if that makes sense. It's not working the best, but I could also do this and crop the image so that now it's exactly sitting across it, and let's make it a little smaller so there's no cutoff there. If I zoom in, that would make this job a lot easier. Now I can really see. Okay, let's bump her over to right there. I mean, now there's this strange little cutoff there. In my opinion, that's a bit weird. We're not really making a real one here. I'm just showing you what it would look like to include actual specific custom artwork design in your chapter header. Now, I really think that looks strange. So let me see if I can at least find a better style. Let's go over to handwriting, which I don't know. I like handwriting. Nope. I mean, that's okay. See, I don't like this. Anyway, you can see how I'm just playing around with it. I could draw it all the way down to the bottom, but of course, if this is your chapter header, then there's going to be words underneath that. It's gonna look really, really strange. Another thing that I could do is I could keep her behind it like that, but I could input one of these lines here, and so that makes it a more intentional looking cutoff. It's not amazing, but you get the idea. Let me zoom out and compare them too. So this is just 3 examples where I put together really, really quick chapter headers.
As promised, I want to show you how to do ebook formatting, since the other stuff that I just went over was fully related to paperbacks. And so remember how I said that ebooks are going to have a whole different system, and you don't want to get rid of the chapter titles because it's going to be grabbed by the ebook vendor. Like here on Draft Digital, they're going to grab each of the chapter names and include it in a table of contents for the reader. And so ebooks are supposed to have table of contents for readers, so it's really important that you don't lose that. I'm going to show you how Draft to Digital lets you make the chapter headers really gorgeous without actually downloading any specific image. But really quick before I do, I also want to point out on the side here, you can see how Draft to Digital helps you add some of the front and back matter, which they call end matter. So title page, copyrights, dedication, also by, and about the author, and so on. So if you ever don't want to do these front and back matter pages within Word, you can do them directly in Draft to Digital. And here are the fancy formatting things that I just mentioned. So let me start on a chapter page. So right here is chapter 1. Right now I have it on the style called fantasy, which is perfect for my fantasy book. But I have also used the dragon when it was the Cursed Hunter with the dragon theme. And there's a bunch of others specific to fantasy, as you can see here. But then there's also a romance category, which is really cute. There's a mystery and thriller category. I happen to think this looks extremely classy. There is an all-purpose that is just really basic, or watercolor, cute little corner decorations. That's also gorgeous, I think. And then there's very minimal. And there's even nonfiction options, which you'll notice that unlike fiction, which was always single space like this, nonfiction actually will double space between paragraphs, and textbook does the same thing. So I'm going to pop this back to my fantasy, which is the one that I went with. You can enable drop caps, so you don't want to pull over drop caps from a physical book because it's much easier to let Draft to Digital enable it for you. And if I skip to chapter 2, you can see that the same changes are going to stay in place no matter what chapter we're on. I also want to show you the scene breaks, because this cute little scene break here is the fantasy one, but the different style options here on the side also have different scene break options. And I know I've talked about Draft to Digital before, so if you want to know more, I will link my video all about it in this series playlist, but I just want to point out that this is the page where you can download the file for Kindle or for Nook or Kobo, or just even a PDF just for yourself without ever publishing the book online, and you can get this really gorgeous ebook formatting directly to your computer to put on other vendors without ever actually publishing on Draft to Digital if you wanted to.
Hopefully that gives you a starting point. I would encourage you to definitely enjoy this process and be creative, because chapter headers are actually one of the few things that are meant to draw the reader's eye and be a little bit more creative. But now, in the very last video in this series, I want to bring everything together into one video and walk you through all the steps. So putting together everything we've learned is not me resharing everything that I've shared, because that would be a really long video. I'm literally just going to show you a bunch of the steps all put together really, really fast. So I think hopefully it goes without saying that if you want to know actually how to do these things or why I do these things, I need you to go back and watch the video on that subject. Let's dive in. We're going to start with a blank Microsoft Word document. The first thing that we have to do before we do anything else is change the size, because just looking at this like printer size paper, it does not say novel to me, and it's driving me crazy. So we're going to go into Format, Document, into the page setup, and it's US letter size, but we're going to switch it over to my 5x8. Click OK, make sure it applies to the whole document. Step 2, let's put in a book title. Step 3, we're going to modify this to actually look like a book title. I had that favorite font. Was it this one? Oh, so pretty. I'd like it to be bigger. Yeah, really big. It should definitely be centered, and let's give it a bunch of space before it, that's above it, on top, and also a little space below it as well. There we go. Enter. Let's put in a subtitle. Let's modify all subtitles so that they look, I like that font actually, but I would like it to be centered. Next, we're gonna go to layout, put in a page break because we want to start a new page. Before we keep going though, let's go back to the home page, to the style section. Normal is looking strange to me. Let's modify it. Let's make it smaller. 11 points, pretty average. Times New Roman would be better, just looks classier. And then we do need to do a couple changes here because remember in the alignment we want it to be justified always. We want to have that first line indented, and then I think that's it. So clicking OK. Except for that first line we don't want indented, but we'll come back to that. Copyright. That's how you make the symbol, by the way. Paragraph, C, paragraph, and the year is 2021 now, which is crazy. My name, we're gonna have the all rights reserved, legal jargon, paragraph right here, contact info, credits info, ISBN info, and edition info, okay? And then on the next page, we're gonna put in another page break. This would be typically another title page. So I might copy all this gorgeousness. So I clicked Control A, Control C to copy, and Control V to paste it in. And maybe that first title page, I think I told you guys, it's usually just the title and nothing else. But this page, let's insert an image with insert, image, picture from file. And I actually want my Grace House Press logo PNG file right there. Oh, it's huge. So we're gonna resize it. Just my computer screen now because my camera has died. And let's bump it down. Oop, too far. There we go. Now I'm gonna go ahead and click next page. I wanna zoom out. This is what we have so far. Now you could put in tons more front and back matter here, but let's just count here. If the very first page of a book is always the right side, then this is the left side, and then right side, and then the left side. And I would like chapter 1 to start on the right, so I'm gonna have one more page break, and then we're gonna go back to styles. Let's find our header. That's book title. Oh shoot. You know what, I feel like let's start with this, but we're gonna modify it. So chapter 1, let's zoom in so you guys can really see it well. All right, that looks terrible. That does not look like a title or a book chapter to me. So we're gonna modify. I'm gonna call this my chapter header, and then man, I really do like this. So for the sake of keeping things simple, we'll do that, but definitely much bigger. How about 36 looks pretty. Probably in the center would be better. I love the preview here. Never blue, because we don't want to pay extra for color. And then I'm also going to go into the paragraph option here, because typically chapter headers start a little ways down the page. So maybe, I don't know, say let's try this far. And then typically they're going to have a little space after them as well. Okay. There we go. Let me zoom out a bit so you can see that. That is our chapter header. If we click enter, and we're gonna say, first line, fanciness, this is what's happening, da-da-da-da. Now you're gonna notice that everything is indented here, which is fine for the second line. We want that, but for the first line, we don't. So let's grab, we're gonna make one of these our first line, okay? So first thing I'm gonna do, keep things life simple, update to match selection. And then I want to modify it. I want to call this the first line of a chapter. Okay, so it's Times New Roman, it's 11, but then here's where we want to make a slight change. Okay, I'm going to go into the style pane actually and make a new style because that was getting funky. So first line of a chapter. Okay, and then the one thing that we're going to change, because remember that first line does not have this. So honestly, we could just do none, and that's fine too. Click OK and OK. So now there's our first chapter. We're gonna go ahead and highlight our first line. Sorry, we're gonna highlight it, and instead of having it be the main body, we're gonna make it first line of the chapter. See how it bounces over? Third line, fourth line, etc. Now we've finished our chapter, so we don't want to start chapter 2 on the same page. Next page it is, and in this case, where's my styles? I have a chapter header that I need to do. Now I'm noticing that that doesn't fit as nicely, does it? So we're gonna go into our chapter headers, modify all of them. We're gonna make them just a wee bit smaller. There we go. That looks so much nicer. And then now I'm gonna click first line of the chapter, and here's the first line. Oops, I'm still in all caps. Line of chapter 2. And second line of chapter 2, you'll notice that we need to switch it over to main body.
which I clicked right there. And there you go. I would really like to insert some character art. Let's do this pretty picture of Ari right here. And we don't want her to go on to 2 pages, so we're gonna set this up so that there's an anchor and then fix it on the page so that I can move it. There we go. Let's zoom out and see what we have so far. But what if I want to take one of my fun chapter headers that I made in our video on chapter headers? Well, let's go ahead and download this first one that was my favorite. It doesn't exactly match our story, but for the sake of this video, it's gonna work just fine. If we were doing this in real life, I would save this as my ebook version, because for the ebook, you need to have something that says what chapter it is for the ebooks to create a table of contents. But for the sake of this video, we're gonna pretend that we've saved it as the paperback specific draft, and we would like this one to say chapter 1. What we're gonna do is click insert, picture from file. We're going to insert that chapter 1. Look at that baby. That looks so snazzy. Let's zoom in on it. Wow. That is your first page of your book. Seriously, I am like the best chapter header designer in the entire world, obviously. So amazing. Wow. I just really like that. And obviously, if this were a real book, these would be full sentences that would continue on into further pages. If you liked how the chapter header looked here, you wouldn't even have to worry about bleed, because as you can see, it is currently within the margins. You wouldn't have to move it. You wouldn't have to do anything because it looks gorgeous, just like it is. Well, there you go, my friends. That is me putting all of the video information together. I showed you how to make sure you include the 10 basic formatting rules, how to input some different front and back matter, how to size the book correctly and resize it if you need to, how to choose different fonts, how to add images, how to add chapter headers, and this is just such a fun process for me because I've gotten comfortable with it. But don't be surprised if it takes you a little while to get to the comfort level that I am. This is me over 10 books into formatting. I've done this for a very long time, so it's totally normal if it takes you a little while to remember where to find things. I would even encourage you to take notes if you need to go back and watch my videos. They are always going to be available for you.
Whenever you need to know more than what I've shared, I would just encourage you to talk to my TA. She will be waiting in the wings to help you whenever you need. I promised you guys I would end by sharing about this gorgeous pre-formatted publishing template. So this template is from DIYbookformats.com and it was created by an author, Derek Murphy, and it's an absolute lifesaver. I have it linked below where you can go download the template, and it includes a ton of different styles, which you'll see here, as well as a really thorough explanation of how formatting works within that template and how to use that template. What I would recommend that you do after you download it is keep that template as it is for all future books, and then resave it with your new book's title and work within that document, so that way you always have that template with you for future books.
Hope this video series was super helpful to you. Again, thank you so much for doing things like liking the videos, sharing them with your friends, subscribing to my channel, putting on the notifications. All of those things help my channel out so much, and I really appreciate it. It's like a free tip jar. I just wanted to say thank you again for being here. I really wish I was writing a sci-fi fantasy book right now, and I just hope you guys enjoy this video and this series. Let me know in the comments if you liked it and what other videos you'd like me to do in the future. So thank you again for being here, and I will talk to you guys again very soon. Bye!